Blog Talk Radio.
Here at ACO Radio, American Communications Online, or any affiliated stations or websites are not responsible for what guest hosts or call-ins may say. All programming is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only.
Hello, world. Hello, world. Hello. Can you hear me? I'm doing something different right now and using some different equipment that it's not taking my headset right now, but I was changing. So welcome all you ground troops, spin around smartly. We're going to do UFO Association today, and we do this for American Communications Online, a company we're building for many of our friends in broadcasting, and we do archives and websites and associate with each other in various genres. And I've had Blog Talk Radio, TJ Mars ET Radio since 2012, so we're not really new at this, but we're always trying new people and new equipment. But this is an old hand now we're going to do and call Jan Aldrich, and I like to call him to save him money, because he's up in the area of the country that apparently has a little trouble from time to time, and we've got 5G where we're at, so don't hold it against us, but it's the way we communicate these days. But let me see if I can get Jan on here so we can start a recording and a live show, and I'll let friends of mine know if they're interested in attending on social media, free social media like Facebook, Internet, Google, Twitter, things like that. And we move forward from there doing, making archives. So we're going to call and see, and then we'll be right here and going to record some.
You've reached the voicemail system. If you have a mailbox on this system, press star.
Yeah.
To leave a message for someone, enter their 10-digit phone number now.
Huh. Well, let's try this one more time.
You've reached the voicemail system. If you have a mailbox on this system, press...
Okay, let's see. Let me try this. Invite guest calls. Okay, Jan, are you there? Okay, I've got to get you into the system. I apologize. I've called you on the wrong number. You're on the right number, but I'm on the wrong number to pull you into this studio. Let me call right back. Okay, I'll call you right back. Thank you. Okay, folks, I've got different information for different connections because I do so many radio shows and run so many studios. So let me get the right studio with the right buttons, and I'm going through one of my studios on New York and Oregon, Blog Talk Radio, because it's really easy, folks, and it really helps us keep all our archives for many years, and they always keep a copy. Let's see. Jan, can you hear me now? Jan? Are you there, Jan? What am I doing wrong? Hold time. Well, let me try one more time. Dialing.
Hello?
Now I got you. Can you hear me on the radio show?
Yes.
Okay, finally. I apologize to you and everybody that's our listeners for our American Communications Online and our UFO Association that Jan so gratefully decided to help us archive some oral archives and help us know more about all the people that's been out there that we may or may not know about. So we're going to move forward. We're calling this our Book 2, Episode 3, Jan, for the record, because we do roughly 2,000 a week. 2 hours a week, folks. I do more than that. But Jan, as far as I know, is a weekly co-host here with TJ Mars ET Radio. If anybody keeps up with where the archives are. You can always find them on TJMR's ET Radio, and that's on Blog Talk Radio. That company's out in New York, and Mr. Levy started that, and then they sold it to Vox Nest. Any of you historians out there want to know how we're doing this. And then I pay a certain bill monthly to archive and to do live radio shows. And Jan Aldrich joined me a couple of months back in 2019. I think it was October. We can go back and look at the archives, which we're making. But Jan, do you remember when we started, when you went to Chicago? Do you have a copy of your flight ticket for historical purposes with you and Barry Greenwood? You know what date that was?
Gee, I have to look it up on my computer. I did
yeah, we're historians, but we don't keep up with
I did
ourselves.
a trip report on my website about 2 trips I made, and we were in Chicago.
Yeah, so.
But I also had seen. I also went and visited Tom Tallene out in Chicago, and then we went to California and interviewed and met with some people out there. So it was quite a summer.
Okay. Well, 2019, basically, folks, we started. We'll have to go back, anybody listening, to hear how we really started these 2 books. But they're roughly 2 books, 20 hours apiece of just oral history. And the reason we're doing this is because it's getting to be where time feels like it's speeded up in our UFO Association. And everybody doesn't have the time we used to just type and write or collect or scan and research, and there's so many more people out there in cyberspace in our collective consciousness doing this. We believe there's a rise in the UFO enthusiasts, and alien civilizations exist. So I've made Alien Contact Organization as a part of our UFO Association and the American Communications Online, and I've had websites for years, and I had UFO Association, the original one, way back when, in the early 2000s, and I got started back in 1967 with ACIR before we even had MUFON that moved into Texas. But that started up in Wisconsin, I was told. But we're started back with balls of light, which Jan and I have familiarized ourselves with in our own experience. And his story starts as a high school student. And I'm sort of talking here about Jan Aldrich, but his father, he had questioned about his father, and so we started his story, and it sort of combined with Kufo's and his trip. And I was very curious, and also in Barry Greenwood. And Barry's got like the 85 forward because Jan was in the military then, and so was I. He was Army and I was Navy. So we're starting to combine our history and tag some timelines, I guess. So bear with us, and we'll create the best reality we can together. Now, Jan has a project1947.com website, and I've had so many, I've got over 35, that I've been combining my downloading of what they call flatten, because I had so much data out there. But I'm keeping my Blog Talk Radio shows, if you're interested, on TJMRCT Radio. Well, Jan, let's see, you've dropped 2 names. Did you get those dates up for us, or where do you want to start? Because Tom Tallene, now, how much do you remember from last week?
Well, we've talked about him several times. One of the things that he's done is he has about 200 interviews with various people in the UFO field, and I helped him on about I'd say 50 of them.
Wow!
And we've interviewed Frederick Durant, who's in the CIA. We interviewed various people that were in Project Blue Book. We interviewed UFO witnesses around the country. We've interviewed people that have come to visit from overseas, like we did Klaus Svahn at Kufos. He was visiting from Sweden, so that was a very interesting interview. And I asked him about ghost rockets. One of the things he said about ghost rockets, I said, when did they stop? And he said, they never have, which is very, very telling. He said, well, with the demise of the Soviet Union, they appeared to slow down for a while, but they're still going on. So, and he interviewed a number of people like Al Chop, who was the spokesman for Project Blue Book in 1951 and 52, 53. He and my colleague Brad Sparks interviewed the head of Blue Book when in the 60s with as a friend of Hynek, Colonel Friend, and of course Colonel Friend was still there at that time saying, well, I don't know what UFOs are, and he was still bleeding Air Force blood if you cut him. He bleed Air Force blue, but in 2012 he came forward and said, you know what, I've always believed in these things. So that's interesting.
Yeah, very. Now, you believe J. Allen Hynek had the same epiphany or the same thoughts or theosophy or philosophy? I don't even know what we're going to call it yet. I don't know if it's truth or belief or because
I can't tell about Hynek. He has so many different stories about when he started to think that there was something to him. He sort of implies that he was partway convinced in 52, and then, but you know, then he's talking later, and it's hard to tell exactly. In 1960, for sure. In 1960, for sure, he went to a conference down at England Air Force Base, and that's where he really let his hair hang down. And he was talking about the little men in France and all these other things, which would, you know, up to that time, being on the outside looking in, we couldn't figure out what the heck what was this, because, you know, Hynek was always so negative, but very early, I guess you could say, at least in 1960, you could say he was pretty well, he sounded pretty well convinced when he gave that speech at England Air Force Base. And it was internal in the Air Force. And 2 years later, he's writing for Yale Scientific Review and debunking UFOs. So, like I said, it's hard to tell when Hynek really was convinced that there was something more to UFOs. But I think the 1960, you can say that's probably, at least he pretty well let his hair down then.
Well, let's talk about our own personal timeline real quick so we can get on the record. Now, my first sighting, of course, was prior to Sputnik in the way my mind remembers it, just an overhead in the cloud visitation. Then Sputnik, we know, was 57. Now, I was born in 12/26/51, December 26, which is a marked timeline, apparently, for ufology for many people, including Peniston and over in England when that December 26, I forgot what year, 1980, I think. But what was the first? Did we establish you were born in what, 49? Or what year were you born?
44.
44. And
yeah,
you started with Ball of Lightning, I know, and the discovery, and I think your father had a lot to do with chemistry and things like that, right? But let's say, so if I'm establishing roughly, I'll say 1954 without knowing the exact date. But so I had a higher feeling, and then me dying made me think angels, extraterrestrials, or whatever you want to call them. I didn't know about Star Trek till many years later, and my parents wouldn't let me stay up and watch it. But 1967 is when I was recruited by the government and did my first paperwork. And my husband worked at NASA, and I know he called me up in 69, and they talked about one of them, I don't know if it's Buzz Aldrin, who I forgot, but said bogey 10 o'clock high, something like that. So I got to hear that. But my first, I saw UFOs go overhead in Houston. So we moved to Birmingham about 1978, and then we had sightings in Birmingham. But my biggest one with my children was in Rochester, 1983, I believe, between 81 and 83, because I moved back to Houston 84 and went to Africa. We had a sighting, but that's the one where it was a big white light and two red balls shot up and set up over it. One went one way and one went the other way, and I never got explanation, but I wasn't asking anyone either. So, and then I've got on the investigation where I met J. Allen Hynek in 85 when he asked me about aliens among us. Ruth Montgomery had just put out a book, and he asked me to continue his work on the airplane, but I didn't know why, and he was very amused with my story. So I guess in a way, in 2019, you and I got together to start moving forward with UFO Association and Oral Archives. But that's sort of a short, I didn't have all mine, but that's a short rundown. Now, yours would start with your dad, and then did you have a physical sighting, or did you just strictly go to Washington because of the ball of lightning?
Well, ball lightning was how I started, but I guess you could say ball lightning is related to you. Well, not related, but in the same category as UFOs. Nobody thought it was real for a long time.
Right.
And I started researching ball lightning, and just by researching ball lightning, I came across UFOs. I got Ruppelt's book, but I remember the 1954 sighting of the. In fact, I transcribed it off the radio as fast as I could. I was listening to the radio. It's 1954. It's Marysfield or Marysville, Ohio. It's a very famous sighting. Anybody that can look it up can find it. And this cigar-shaped object was over the local school, and this white material was falling from it, and it was like spider webs, and the kids would pick it up, and the teachers would pick it up, and it would evaporate in their hands, and it was very strange. And I noticed on the radio, I mean, the news guy was just given a very long news story about that, and I remember writing that down. But I didn't continue interest in it. That was just one of the I think one of my first experiences about hearing about UFOs in '54 there was, man, it was really. I always thought that was a really strange case. So it's in Keogh also, and it's in the UFO evidence. And you think you can go online, and it's on my site. I talk about. I have a clipping of about Captain Bob White, who was UFO spokesman in '54 through about '56, '57. I think he was early '57. He retired. And he was the one that had to knock down all the UFO cases, except for one except. He was like Colonel Friend. He believed in UFOs. And he gave Keogh some hints and he shot him some things that were unclassified. So it's kind of interesting that a lot of people associated with Project Blue Book or the Public Information Office on UFOs are believers. So it's kind of interesting. Keogh is going to put Bob White's belief in UFOs after he retired from the Army, but he asked him not to. He said, well, I still might get in trouble. So did I say the Army? I meant the Air Force. So he deleted it from his book, Flying Saucers Conspiracy. He had a number of people in the Pentagon and elsewhere that were sympathetic to his ideas. So they would feed him stuff too, and of course he's a Navy West Point graduate, so it's always things coming to Keogh. I think he's one of the first UFO books I read. The real one was Edward Ruppelt, Report on Unidentified Flying Objects. And if anybody hasn't read it, you should. If you don't really know anything about UFOs unless you read that book. And the other thing I say is UFO evidence, and both of them are real cheap. You can get them on Amazon for a couple of bucks each. And if you're interested, it's well worth your while.
Well, I'll put that on here. Give me the names of the books. I'll put suggest on, because we have a little room today's show.
Sure.
Suggest
UFO evidence.
Evidence. Okay.
Now, volume 1 was, and it was National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena published it. So, real interesting report on UFOs and how they appear to operate, and things about patterns, maneuvers, and of course how here.
And I'll need the other book too.
Yeah, it's Captain Edward Ruppelt, Report on Unidentified Flying Objects, and he was the head of Blue Book in 51 through 53, and that was of course when the big Washington flap happened. So it was really an important time.
What's the name of that book, though? I've got Captain Edward Ruppelt, and I've got it. But I can't.
The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects.
Okay, I'm typing it in. Unidentified flying objects. Now, is that the one that Stanton read, Stanton T. Friedman?
I'm sure he read it, yes.
Now, that's Captain Edward Riphelp, the report on unidentified flying objects. What was the name of Kehoe's book again, so I can write it down?
Well, he had several. So
Well,
the first one was Flying Saucers Are Real. That was in 1950. That was in 1950. That was a bestseller.
Now, that's Donald Kehoe, or how do we...
Donald E. Kehoe. He's a major and a retired major from the Marine Corps.
Okay.
And his second book was Flying Saucers from Outer Space. And his third book was Flying Saucers Conspiracy. And his fourth book was Flying Saucers Top Secret. And that was in 1960. And that's about the early days of, yeah, it's about the early days of NICAP. I think that's pretty good way to characterize it. And I think the last one was Aliens in the Sky. He wrote that before he died. Aliens from Space. I am sorry.
Aliens from Space.
Right, and I don't think that. I think the book company decided that was going to be the title, not him. But that was written in. Let's see here. 1973. So that was.
Well, that's a lot of information.
He also wrote another one with Gordon Lohr about. It was a NICAP publication. It's called Strange Effects from UFOs. And it's kind of rare. And I like that one, of course, but I'm interested in effects in UFOs, so that's one of the main things I study. So.
Oh, really? So I like to study human behavior. I don't really study the apparatus or the hard drive or what makes it go. I know a lot of electrical engineers are interested in that, or research and development. But you like to study
UFOs effects on people in the environment, or people and animals in the environment, that's a kind of a let's put it this way. As far as UFO sightings, those kind of sightings are kind of rare. But even though they're rare, there's plenty of them still. Like I say, even though they're rare, say they're one in a couple of hundred, or one in some of them are 1 in 500, depending on what kind of effects happen, like heat from UFOs. That may be 1 in 10,000 of those cases you find. And as far as we know, we don't know how many cases we have. CUFOS thinks they have 100,000. I don't know how many MUFON thinks they have. They're pretty close to 100,000 also. In fact, I think they passed 100,000 cases.
Oh, really?
So that's.
So we don't really collect cases, but I study human behavior and cultural change. And I do American culture and international relations as it relates to paranormal desk or paranormal and the interest in metaphysics, our theology, everything to do with cosmology, right? Metaphysics falls under cosmology. And my ace folk life falls under, well, folk life, whether it's fairy tales or real, or theology or theosophy, that depends on the individual. It's very subjective. So I don't really know where UFO Association falls under, except we're archivists and historians. But most of us are UFO enthusiasts. We just don't know, how to have a community portal for everybody. I'm trying to find the proper portal description. So I've had alien contact org separate, alienologists separate from Janet, and a lot of the people that do these events. They keep like MUFON and UFO hardcore. They call it nuts and bolts people, separate from those that like to talk about the psychological effect or do past lives or prior past life regressions, or they do abductions, right? Which was it Mac, John, was it Bob Mac, Bill Mac, John Mac, something like that? That kind of work.
Dr. John Mack up at Harvard, yeah.
Okay, so you understand what I'm saying. They've seen
right.
over time between contactees, abductees, ufologists, alienologists, they're separated. Now, I've been using alienologists with people on my radio for the past few years, and I noticed Alejandro Rojas, that has the International UFO Congress in Phoenix. I saw a YouTube on him after I talked with Rick Doty and was separating all this and putting it out to free social media, how I was separating terms because of analytics and, how we say keywords or search engine optimization. So that's what I sort of got into out of because I had so many domains and websites for years, and it just got to be too much on me. So I've got to bring it back into one portal community. It's not easy, folks. So you and I are pretty much doing the UFO Association, but we can still break it down into my American Communication Online company. And under the company, I was just talking to some people in India to help me try to make an Adobe portal, community portal, and then break it down. What, I don't know, the hardcore would be, how would you say the Bob Lazar vehicles at Area 51? Because Rick Doty worked with the Air Force in Albuquerque, and they have a whole story over there with Wendell Stevens and I guess Roger Moore. That whole thing. That's more Albuquerque. And you were talking about Eglin. But I always think, if you want to say logistics, I think of Dr. Halleck at J. Allen Hynek with the Chicago group, CUFOs in Chicago. But they don't have an event annually, do they, in Chicago, other than the Pyramid Con? Do y'all have an annual event?
I don't know of any event that CUFOS is. They had one conference one time, and I think they got a bad taste in their mouth, so they were never going to do it again.
Oh, they didn't care for it. All right.
I don't know for sure. I can't tell you that for sure, but I think there was a problem.
Okay.
Okay, I just got my trip report up here. Yeah, we talked in August.
August? It's been that long?
Yeah. That's not the first time we talked, though. That was out at I was out at CUFOS. We had talked, I think, about 2 or 3 weeks before then.
Well, July 4th weekend, maybe, because you couldn't make July 4th, maybe. I don't know. Well, I should have written all this down, folks, but we get so busy, don't we, Jan, thinking. And but anyway, we'll just use.
Yeah, I believe it was in July, because the trip before that, where I went to meet Tom Tulane, was May 27th to June 6th.
Yeah, I think we talked on the phone about that time, and we talked about Erica Lukes. Do you remember? Did you talk to Erica on her show before Tom Tulane?
Yeah, I did about 3 or 4 shows with her.
Okay.
Remembrance of NICAP and about the people that work there. Barry Greenwood wanted me to talk about things that most people don't talk about. You know, the people that work there and what they were like. And he said somebody has to do this. He says a lot of these people are dead now.
Yeah, exactly.
So
you know it by heart.
You know, you'll have their writings, but you know, what were they like in real life? So we did a couple of shows with Erica, and then one of the persons that is still alive is Gordon Lohr, and he did a book, Flying Saucers from Beyond Earth, which is about his time in NICAP during the 60s, the 1960s, and then he had his own organization in California and New Mexico in about 1970 through 1980.
Well, 2019 was an interesting year because we had a lot of people that were new, young, up-and-comers, and they didn't know what they were doing, and they were calling us nuts in the business because they wanted to compete in YouTube numbers with different people. And we had one of the girls, young, and she had been hanging out with some people in MUFON in Phoenix, and she started talking stuff, you know, that wasn't true. And Erica Lukes got involved and called me, and we talked about it. So that's how Erica Lukes and I hooked up, was over social media and various groups of people that were coming in and taking over our UFO groups. And they literally will sneak their way in and then take over. And then one girl trusted me to try to wait her. She had to be in my group. And one of the other girls that was in my group from 2017 called me and made her a moderator, administrator type. And then she just took all my people and made her own group, interestingly enough, and then said I was crazy and that Erica was crazy. So, and they put that on radio, which I guess we could have sued, but I don't know what's going on that with Eric anymore. I just dropped it. But Jan Harzan asked me about what was going on too, because it was women in 2019, a lot of newcomers, and they started doing pretty good reports, so it made them look pretty good. But I don't know what their ulterior motive was. So we found out in 2019 that a lot of people were just wanting the content, but we don't know what they were selling, if that makes any sense.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about, like different UFO groups. There was a Sunday Network News or something like that, but the girl didn't have a real name. She was using an alias on YouTube.
Greenwood is even less interested in current history than I am, but I'm mostly interested in the history of UFOs. And like I said, as far as UFOs themselves, I'm interested in effects associated with UFOs. So that's where I am. So I don't interact a lot with current ufology. We do have a small history group, and of course Michael Swords is the head of that with Robert Powell, and of course we wrote there's 10 of us that helped write the UFOs in Government book that's it's not the last word in history, but it's a pretty comprehensive book on early history up to the maybe the 2000s. So.
Well, do you have a channel on YouTube that we can look up?
No, I don't do any. I think it's like I told you at KUFOS. I have more than I can do just trying to wrangle my own files. I occasionally come on people's shows to talk about UFOs.
And that's good.
I'm sure we're not going to solve it in the next few years. So one of my things is to give some people some leads and things like that are going to come after me that they can follow. So that's my idea of coming on shows and things. I have my website, and that's mostly a history website, but it's got a lot of things that people have missed about UFOs. They different effects and maneuvers and actions of UFOs. So I've tried to stay away from mostly the well-known cases. You can't do that completely, but I've tried to introduce people to some of the high interest, high reliability cases to get them interested in something else than just the let's talk about Captain Mantle's crash or Washington D.C. or let's really talk about some important cases that have maybe slipped away from people's memory or they never knew about them. And that's what I've done. And of course, I've been combing government archives for a while, so I found some things that many people may not know about. And actually, what I do is try to stay in the background. Dominic Weinstein is a captain in the gendarmerie in France. He's in French police intelligence, and what I did with him is we started compiling cases that where air crews were involved. So he had about 1,500 cases where air crews are involved. And I was helping him with the United States, and then Dr. Haynes was helping him with the United States cases, and he was getting cases from France and Spain, England, all over the world, and was actually his case list was used by the French Space Agency, which does have a UFO study still going on, a government study, and it was used by the French Space Agency to work on things like radar and things like that. So
now, was this before or after Oxcart? Because when I think of I don't know, government and nuclear, and I don't know, there's something about Oxcart and nuclear. How do you separate it in your files? About time
well,
frame?
nuclear. I think about the most well-known person in that is Richard Hastings, who wrote UFOs and Nukes, and so. He did an interview with us. He did an interview with Tom and I, and we exchanged material. So it was involved there. I've tried to cooperate with other people that are doing various projects. George Eberhard had this UFO outline of UFO history that must have at least 1,000 different entries, and I was working on the earlier UFO history with him, So I think we've got almost 2,000 entries in this UFO history. And when you put things in chronological order that you can rapidly go through, you see a lot of relationships that may not have appeared by just reading somebody's book. So that's one of the things we did. So I work with that. I've worked with people that are doing electromagnetic effects catalogs overseas, like in Germany and England. I've tried to work with people in Australia and several other and this is all on more or less on the QT, not making a big deal about it. So that's where I am. I'm not trying to run around toot my own horn or saying I know what's going on, because I don't. And the more I know, the less I know. What's that?
But you have what you've collected. So let's say, being humble people, are doing our best. I've studied it out of human nature investigations, but weren't allowed to share what I was doing. So I don't know, now I'm retired and I'm coming out, I can talk about things, but very limited. But as long as it's with paranormal disc and personal experiences, I'm told that's fine, right? But the Oxcart program, back in the day, there was all these different companies that wanted to use reverse technology or get in on the space race. And U-2 fights, the Soviet Union and all of that, it got to be where it was need to know Russians versus the USA and all that. But now in secret space, so to speak, or the new space program, they're all working together and always have. As long as I was in uniform, we worked, we thought, whether you say that there's propaganda and the Russians are the enemy, they can ask and then they'll say your programs. But I'm not sure where we're going to go with, let's say the CIA, for instance, on Oxcart. Just that word alone, the Oxcart program. In the I don't even know when that was. I'm looking. Titanium was scarce. Methods surveilling it, controlling the quality. It had something to do. Titanium Metals Corporation, 80% had to be rejected. It was not until 1961 when a delegation from headquarters visited the officials of a company, informed them the objectives of high priority of the Oxcart program. And I've got titanium in my neck. So a lot of it, I've heard about some of the aliens wouldn't allow us to have certain, this stuff starts sounding wacky, but in the pioneering achievement of the Oxcart, 1962, there was a test pilot, but that we were reverse technologying things on the moon, and some things we couldn't have, and that has to do, I don't know, but it all seems to do with the UFO business now, like gravity and space and, I don't know, Lockheed, Boeing. So is there a name for all of that? It used to be on the...
I don't know. You're getting beyond
metals.
me. You're getting beyond where I am. So
well, I don't know what to
can't
call
really
that.
I can't really give a very good opinion there. I like I said, I've been doing UFOs, and that's more than enough for me for 50 years.
Well, this all goes with it. It's just more...
I mean, the Oxcart was a plane that could go Mach 3. Now that's pretty fast. That's 3 times the speed of sound. But it was just a fueled aircraft.
So is that the John Lear
it's nothing more than a souped up chemical propelled aircraft. So
maybe we can put all the people that were pilots.
Now titanium.
Yeah.
My father worked on that very early.
That's
in
what I
the
thought.
1950s, and it was supposed to be they used to call it the Cinderella metal because it was light and it was strong. and it had a high melting point, and so it had a lot of good possibilities for use in aerospace type of things. So, and I know that he was working for Chase Brass and Copper, which is part of Kennecott Copper at the time, and they were doing a lot with titanium and a lot of the new metals. They were working on the new metals at the time, things that some of these things were really exotic, what they could do. They had exotic properties. Rhenium was one of the metals, and it was very expensive at the time. I think it was $25,000 to get a pound of pure rhenium, or maybe it was an ounce. I don't remember. It was a fantastic amount of money just for a small amount of. But it had certain things. It was transparent to infrared, so that was kind of a unique property that that metal had. And so, like I said, titanium was a very new metal. You didn't have to have a lot of the things that World War II, what they used in World War II. You could have much lighter stuff, and you could push it much faster because it wasn't as heavy to push around in the atmosphere. And a lot of the things in the space program the same way. It's and of course, for every metal you have good points and bad points. So it's always, it's a trade-off on things. Sometimes you try to make alloys, which will give you properties of both materials together. Brass is an alloy. Bronze is an alloy. So.
Well, can you address the element 115 or anything to do with Area 51?
There's still, these people still exist. 115.
Stability.
What we've made so far is highly unstable. It's very radioactive. It breaks down almost immediately after you make it. I know Lazar claims that he walked around with some of it. Quite frankly, he's crazy as a loon. Nobody walks around with 115. It's if you have a big amount of 115, you're dead. You put it in your back pocket and walk out of Area 51, you're dead.
So
he would be ashes now.
So maybe he put the wrong number. Maybe he was calling it that.
I don't care if it's 115, 116, 117. 114. These things were supposed to be stable.
Right.
None of them have been found yet. We haven't found a stable element in that group of elements that's supposed to be stable. It's called the island of stability. Now, there's still people that are holding out and saying, well, we're going to find an isotope that's stable. Okay, call me when you do. That's what I say. I'm completely, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. They say it's physically possible that there's enough neutrons to overwhelm the force that is pushing the protons out of the nucleus of these island of stability, 114 to about 117. I think somebody claimed they made 118 a little bit ago. None of these things have been stable, not one of them, at the different isotopes levels. Some of these have 4 or 5 different isotope levels where they have more neutrons. And the latest theory is if there's enough neutrons compared to the number of protons, the binding force of the nucleus will overcome tearing apart of the nucleus because of the radioactivity, and so it'll be stable. And there's supposed to be a small amount of items that are there. Now everybody's trying to say, well, it's just isotopes of 115. Okay, let's see one. Nobody's the stuff they've made so far. I think they have 4 different isotopes of 115, if I'm correct. None of them are stable. They don't even last for a second.
They
just break
16,
down almost
17,
immediately.
18.
They're highly radioactive, and nobody's walking around with them in their pocket or taking them off at Area 51. Here, that's crazy talk.
Well, what they were doing, they had the hole in the middle. We call those, what do we call those? Like when you put back in the day when they made in Egypt, they would stack, they make their own batteries, right? But it's, what is it called? It starts with a T. What am I looking for, folks? The name, it's like a hole in the middle of it, but you have to stack 9. And they have to do that with the elements, but we're in the early stages. Just like, you remember when we did no, I shouldn't say do you remember. Did you study how the first batteries were made? We're at that space right now with UFOs and alienology, where you stack, it has to do with black holes and wormholes in science. But we've got to get there together. We've got to talk to each other about this island of stability, whether it even exists or not. But the information went all the way up to element 118, and the joint working together with the people in experiments, R&D, in the National Library, Oak Ridge. My relatives come from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, on some of them with my husband that was born in Knoxville. But it's funny because Germany had something to do with that. And, Paperclip, when we got the Germans, but was it Russia? It was Russia that got a lot of the other group from Paperclip. But this is still the power of cosmic events that deal with, what do they call them? The circles and like a donut. It's used universally in everything we do with the sacred geometry, even with the Hadron Colliders. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Talking about the nucleus of the atom?
In order to do this, we have to stack 9. It's like, I've seen it done elementary back in the Egyptian days when they learned about batteries. It's sort of like 0-point energy, but you take 9.
As far as I know, the Egyptians never had batteries. There's some people that say some of their pictures look like they're making batteries, but no. I don't know anything about batteries before the Renaissance, after the Renaissance times. This is.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know anything about ancient batteries.
What about the intelligence?
There are people that are saying that there's a possibility that the Greeks may have had something about like a battery, but it's so vague and everything. There's nobody that can. You can't hang your hat on that.
Okay.
And then a lot of people want to get in there, and they read something like that, and then they make up all kinds of stories to go around it.
We're trying to find the way to talk to each other, and that's what you and I are doing as well. But you know how people are talking about the 0-point energy fields?
Yeah, so what is the 0-point energy field?
Well,
I don't know. I've read about this stuff, and it makes no sense.
You think it's part of UFO history or ufology?
No, I don't think it is. I think this this clown out there in England is responsible for most of that.
Quantum field theory?
Cook. I think it's David Cook, or no, it's not him. It's a guy named Cook, and he's crazy as a loon. He used to work for Jane's. He used to work for Jane's, and he wrote a book called 0 Point
Energy.
And
Rational Wiki.
he thought that somehow the Germans had developed anti-gravity, and he's as crazy as a loon. And you know what, his ideas were so crazy he disappeared from ufology, but now he's back again because they're trying to recycle. They try to recycle all these hoaxes over
That's what
and
I was
over again.
wondering.
Yeah,
right, that's sort of where I was going.
Yeah, ufology is full of hoaxes from the very beginning, and so
well, we need to address
it's proved
that
wrong.
because
It's proved it's completely debunked, and then 10 or 15 years later, here it is back again. We can never get rid of anything in ufology.
Interesting.
And
it's like
some of the people that are
stays.
some of the people that are guilty of this are supposedly the leading lights of ufology.
Well, that's why I'm trying to check it with you and have
right.
UFO Association checks and balances.
Yeah, the Murray Island case in 1947 supposedly happened before Arnold.
Now, does that have to do
Ray
with
Palmer was one of the big advocates of this. The two guys said they saw this from a boat near Murray Island, and there was a UFO that was in trouble, and it was things were dropping out of it, and they supposedly collected this stuff, and it's a magic material.
June 21st.
Well, the Air Force picked some of that up. They went up there and talked to these people. Kenneth Arnold was there, and Captain Smith, United Airlines pilot. They both went with the Air Force investigators and talked to these people.
Well, is that the
and
first time we heard about the Men in Black?
Yeah. That's it. So the FBI investigated these guys.
All right.
And they found out they were hoaxers.
Well, what about the Men in Black? That's a franchise now, but it's Men in Black.
It's like I told you earlier. The Men in Black originated with a guy named Bender here in Connecticut, in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And he had a UFO organization, which was worldwide. He had people in Australia, New Zealand, India. He had a branch in England.
Well, you think the CIA just picked it up because it was convenient?
Well, I'm telling you about how the Men in Black appeared in UFO mythology.
Okay, good.
Bender was having trouble keeping up with the organization. He wasn't a man that wanted to run. He liked to read about UFOs. He liked to write about UFOs, but he wasn't somebody that liked to keep accounts and write newsletters and keep membership records. He didn't want to do that kind of stuff. He didn't have that kind of a temperament.
Okay.
And so he said in 1953, the Men in Black came and visited me and told me to get out of the subject. And he implied they were government. Well, he said that they were government, and he said he couldn't tell you who they were or where they were or anything.
Well, can I tell you a story?
He quit. Now, if the men in government are concerned about Flying Saucers International, which was Bender's organization, and they wanted to shut it down, and he had a branch in England, and the branch in England survived to way into the 2000s why didn't they not go over to England and shut them down too? The story makes no sense.
Well, can I tell you a story? Because I'm going to tell you the truth about my Men in Black. Now, it's not the beginning and it's not the end, but it's real to me. When I was in Washington, D.C., and I went for my rehire May 10th, 1987, and I had a polygraph. I'd already had it put some sodium pentothal or something in my system that made me react. My nose was running and I was really emotional, just a little bit. It was sort of creamy white, and they put it in. And I asked the lady, they were supposed to be taking my blood, but it was right before my polygraph. And I was a already trained hospital corpsman in the Navy, so I knew what she was doing, and she was trying to convince me it was for coagulating the blood or something. What's bullshit, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, I was there. I was already there for my rehire with the Central Intelligence Agency. I was already had my polygraph, retina scan, done my writing, seen the psychiatrist and all that. So this is the second polygraph, and I have to go in, and I've got something in me, so I'm being very truthful. But the Men in Black come to play because part of the polygraph, and I'm hooked up, I've already got some kind of sodium pentothal or something in my blood. I'm strapped to the chair with it around my heart and my hands, and they're having me read cards for my psychic ability and all this stuff. They bring Men in Black, about 5 of them, young agents, and stand there in front of me hooked up to my polygraph and tell me to remember these people, or at least remember these men for at least 10 years. I said, 10 years, I'll be dead in 10 years, because I thought I was going to be working for them and was going to be like a courier out of country all the time, right? Which we don't have. Couriers don't have a long-lasting effect. They're the ones that are carrying the secrets, right, on the airplanes. Anyway, I got out of that business, but the Men in Black were brought in on my polygraph. So here's something you can take to the bank. I'm telling you that in 1987, our intelligence agency used Men in Black, at least in my polygraph. Now, I can't tell you why, but they were Men in Black, meaning that's what they were. They were all in black uniforms. And then when an agent came to visit my husband, the young boy that was in training that came to visit and talked to him about coming and teaching again in Washington, and Tom didn't want to teach intelligence because he was Army like you, okay? He was no different than asking Tom than asking you, because you know what S2 division, that's all. But he was an agent for Reagan. But the boy told him, do you know how long it took me to go find a thin black tie in today's? But the boy said he was supposed to wear black because that's what they were told we were accustomed to seeing. Now, that offended Tom because he was a very intelligent CIA officer, an agent that worked on UFOs for Ronald Reagan. But Men in Black are put into our psyche, and I don't know why. But do you think so when they come, they don't have to say anything, that you know who they are?
I don't know, but in the 40s and 50s, black was the man's color. Everybody wore black or gray.
I know, that makes sense.
The preachers might have worn blue, but most
suits.
Everybody wore black or gray. So I'm trying to figure this out. Now, Bender is. I got all kinds of clippings about that. He got out of the UFO thing. This is the way he used it. He said he got visited by government people that told him to quit. So why didn't somebody in England visit the guys over there and tell them to quit?
Well, would you put what I told you as folklore or ufology? Because
I don't think it's UFO myth. We got a lot of myths. James Mosley. Now he used to have a following of of people that hung on his every word and thought he was serious. This guy was never serious. He was always a jokester. I don't know if he ever had a job. I think he inherited his money, and he slowly frittered it away until he died. But he sees this guy standing under an awning in a rainstorm, and he's got a dark hat and a black overcoat and black pants, and he took a picture of him. And he had all his friends convinced, oh, this is a man in black. No, it isn't. It's a guy that's out in the rain trying to keep dry. It's just a guy. And everybody wore a pork pie in the 50s until Kennedy got in, and then that went out of style. Everybody had a pork pie hat and dark suits. And I know when I was going to school, my father used to, on Sunday we used to get dressed up, and that's what I used to wear when we went to church. So I'm not a man in black, but I wore black. and when I went off to college, I had a black overcoat, and so until the '60s came, and then then everything went crazy.
Well, this is what we've got to clarify, because there's, we say misinformation, information, and disinformation, and of course we have propaganda. But the ufology business with the kids today, they don't know what to believe, just like journalism. And I'm having to fight people in social media all the time, because the journalists, I'm a member of Society of Professional Journalists, and like I said about 2019 and these girls, we had a huge thing about this one girl that using a false name. What was that name she used? Chant Hannah, and it was her false name. And she got out there using a false name on UFO and in Facebook. And you've been on her show.
I have.
December 14th, and that's not even her real name, but she does.
Yeah, well, it was just a show to talk about what had happened in 2009. It was about, I think they had about 24 people on it. It was it was just talking about developments in 2009 and what was your opinion of it, which I didn't find that very, because there were so many different ideas. However, I'll say this about Men in Black. Somebody said that Frederick Durant was probably one of the Men in Black. Now, I don't know how they got this idea. I guess he's a CIA guy, and he was in black. And so we asked him point blank. I said, well, do you know this guy? He says, I never heard of him. He said, no, I wasn't one of the men that went to visit him and told him he had to get out of ufology. He said, I did not do that. That's if somebody's trying to pin something on me that I'm not. Now, he's a friend of Ruppelt's.
Yeah.
He thought, just about everybody thought Ruppelt was the nicest guy in the world. And they were really impressed with him. But
well, I don't care who's trying to collect information and share it out there. A lot of newcomers came in and are doing a good job of reporting, but they've got to cite their sources. And as long as you have the human, like you and me, I'm talking my truth, you're talking yours, are what we've collected. And I found it funny that over that girl coming to my group and then taking my people and leaving out of my group.
How did she take your people?
Yeah, she took all my people. She does that she did that intentionally. She was working for some other guy.
I mean, how does she do that?
It's all free social media and Facebook. It's groups. And they go in and they tell everybody something about you or something, and they do it, and then they block you in social media and have all your people and move them over to another group.
Oh, okay.
And I've got another guy that does that too. But they do that. They'll move them around. I don't know what they're doing except collecting people for numbers.
I don't join many groups. I don't join many groups. I just join one or two because they're news groups. The people post
right.
stuff.
Well, there's all kinds.
I don't join groups to speculate about UFOs or things like that.
Well, I just
join
have
people that try to put up. Yeah, I try to find people that are researching and actually doing some work and try to look at what they're doing.
Now, she had an agenda, but she claimed that...
Yeah, I think everybody... The problem with ufology is that's what we got. We got too many agendas and not enough research.
Right.
That's my problem with ufology, and it's been all the time. Now, as far as the Men in Black go, when NICAP put out the UFO evidence, Berliner told me, he says, when I was down there visiting, Berliner told me, I said we had a couple of visitors from the CIA.
Okay.
And I said, how did you know they were from the CIA? Did they identify themselves? He said, no. He said they bought some copies of the UFO evidence, and they asked some questions. And he said they had cheap suits and what looked like almost cardboard shoes. He said
wow.
They were not well dressed.
Well, they have to go buy their suits, I guess.
Yeah, he said they were not. Were not there. So later on, the CIA came back where they identified themselves, and they talked to Dick Hall. And they told Dick Hall that they were putting him in for clearance so they could discuss UFOs with him more. But they asked him questions about sightings and everything, and Dick just gave him copies of the UFO stuff. The only thing he wouldn't give him was things where the people were in sensitive positions and they didn't want to be associated with a UFO sighting. But it's like I said, everybody tries to say, well, the government infiltrates these UFO groups. Why? They got better information than we do.
Right. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't know why they would try to infiltrate. Hall let them have anything they wanted. Anybody came in, and the news people came in, and he was happy to help them because you might get some good publicity, and sometimes you didn't. Sometimes you got bad publicity. But the things were open. Everything was open. I mean, you could go to NICAP and get almost anything you wanted. They had a few things, like I said, locked up in a special filing cabinet, which, like I said, it was people that were currently in the military, and they didn't want people to know who they were. Or like Captain White. Keogh had somebody that worked in Air Force intelligence, and this guy gave Keogh some UFO reports. They were unclassified, but he gave it to Keogh, and so Keogh would want to keep his name out of it. He had people in the Navy that were giving him stuff, but it wasn't classified. He wouldn't take any classified information. So the same thing on the other side. Anybody could come in and get anything they asked about.
So well, yeah, we're open source here, you and I.
Yeah. So
I'm doing this to help.
All I'm saying is the government has more and better information than we do.
Right.
And they, unless it's one specific incident that they're interested in, I can't see them be in this organization. And for sure, Bender, he may have had a few good UFO cases. I think he had one in Franklin, Indiana, which was really spectacular. And the whole town just about belonged to his organization because just about everybody in Franklin, Indiana had seen this UFO, which a cigar-shaped UFO in the sky, and all these smaller UFOs came out of it. And it was all these people in Franklin, Indiana had witnesses, so they found out about Bender, and they all joined Flying Saucers International. The whole town. And they actually had a parade with Bender, you know, as the honorary marshal for one of their parades, because you know, they thought this was so great. And like I said, the whole town just about belonged to the mayor, the police chief, just about every official and most of the citizens belonged to Flying Saucers International. And but he didn't have anything that was really you know, this was a pretty good sighting, but it was, you know, there's others that are just as good. The other thing is that he was not the sharpest tool in the shed, shall we say. So I don't understand why the Men in Black, which that's the origin, Bender's the first guy, why did they come after him? I don't understand it. It's 1953. It's in the Bridgeport newspaper about how he was told to stop investigating UFOs. And he said by the government, not some, he didn't say they were some alien presence or things. You know, the Men in Black have evolved into alien type people that are going around silencing people. So now, before Bender, Don Johnson out at the Boise newspaper, he was the aviation editor at the Boise newspapers. The Statesman had a morning edition and an afternoon edition, and he was the aviation, and he started investigating UFOs right from Kenneth Arnold. But he was also in the Idaho National Guard. And I guess about 48 or 49, the Air Force told him to stop. But that's more or less, he was in the Guard, so he maybe had to take orders from him. He was he felt that it was unfair, but now there's an incident where he was told to stop. Of course, when McDonald talked to him, it was after he died. He talked to his wife. His wife said he was bitter about that. But I think the Air Force was embarrassed that he was a National Guard, Air National Guard. So that might be a Men in Black incident, but it was pretty much people in his chain of command that told him to quit.
Well, let's look at that, because if it was used, and according to, I don't know if it's folklore or ufology, I need your assistance, because I can see on Wikipedia they're putting folklore and ufology together in the same sentence with Albert Bender. And I know Wikipedia is used, whether we approve of it out of UK or whatever, but people go and they use it in schools, Wikipedia. But what I'm doing, I've got Ace Folklife Society, but I've also got UFO Association. I'm trying to separate ufology from folklore, and it's not an easy task.
No, it isn't. It isn't.
I guess we have to establish really what we want to. I mean, people like oh, I don't know, people that started, the old guys, before we pass off. We need to establish, I don't know if you want to say uh, academic, in the academic, like right now, Ace Folklife falls under anthropology. Like I decided to put it under anthropology because of I was living in Kentucky, Western Kentucky University, and when I was doing festivals and events, and I was doing bluegrass, and I was writing for a report in newspapers, I was doing it from a journalist or storyteller or interest that went under the Smithsonian for collecting people that did music or wrote stories, or we had a lot of great songwriters getting royalties. And it was amazing because they couldn't play music and they were doing it like ear by ear. And then I started listening to some stories about Bigfoot, coming and listening to the music. And then some people saw a UFO over my house, and other people came and would sit to watch it happen. And so I made a report one night when I saw one, and at midnight, and the dogs were barking, and I called 911. Anyway, I got into ufology again, not meaning to. This is the first time officially, 2006 and 7 with MUFON. So then I got in touch with the Kentucky MUFON and Barry Gaunt, and we sent him a picture my daughter took later of a UFO down here in Gulf Breeze. And oddly enough, a tornado chased me out of Kentucky, and my daughter had cancer and was working with people with her health. So I got it all mixed up and blended together with my Ace Folklife in Kentucky and my integrative medicine and helping people with cancer-causing agents and alien, like DNA or whatever in their blood down here, working with Moffitt Cancer Society. And then I had a UFO experience over here on the ocean while my daughter was walking along the ocean, and I get like taken up like I'm out of body or something, and my cell phone just dies. So I don't know what to believe anymore. So I'm trying to separate ufology from folk life, from how we all know things, even if we don't have the words or the music but it goes into folk life. You know what I mean? It becomes part of our culture. And this black...
it's definitely, people say, this looks like a typical flying saucer, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So everybody's supposed to recognize what that looks like.
Yeah.
So
well, we've got to come up with some. I don't know if you want to say international rules, or because you've got all these people that have been doing this for years and years, the old guys, and they're going, "What's going on with these new kids today?" And the new kids watch a History Channel or Aliens or Ancient Aliens and take Sukalos like he's God. I mean, I hear them. Oh, I believe now. I'm like, holy crap. So we're important right now. We need to separate what's what. But I don't know how
here, here's what I was looking for. I was looking for some stuff down in my storage shed, and I pulled out this, which is very interesting. So it's from the Oak Ridger in Tennessee, and this is very early in UFO history, so it's 18 July 1950. Two University of Tennessee professors are organizing their own discussion group to probe into the question of flying saucers. C.A. Newton and Guy H. Parham, Jr., associate professors of engineering, do not say that flying saucers exist, but they believe that serious consideration of all the unexplained area phenomena should be continued until there is adequate scientific explanation of what is acceptable to the people. Even considering the outside possibility that all of these sightings are hallucinations, said Professor Newton, the hallucinations are too prevalent to be ignored. In any case, it is a problem that should be examined from the standpoint of mass psychology. The two professors are not convinced it is a psychological problem. Although some people have called the saucers academically or aerodynamically impossible, they said, the opinion is based on current knowledge of aerodynamics, and maybe we haven't learned everything there is to know. Professor Newton said that the new informal organization will be open to anybody desiring to discuss the matter seriously. The membership will be divided into interest groups which will discuss different theories about the origins of the sightings. The main purpose is to keep the question of the unexplained objects intelligently alive. Very interesting that this is in the Oak Ridger. Apparently, that's the only place that it appeared.
Now you said
so.
Oak
I've
Ridger,
done some research at the University of Tennessee and tried to run down these guys or their organization. I can't find anything.
Oak
It
Ridger?
doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Although one of the student aides there who worked in the library said, "You know what? I've seen some stuff about those guys.
Huh.
So maybe we don't have it, but it's very interesting. It's very early in the UFO thing.
The Oak Ridger
1950
newspaper.
is really early. There's almost no UFO organizations that could go back to 1950.
Well,
and
it was founded
these guys
in
are talking
January.
about studying them. And of course, my thing when I was talking to this student, I said, well, maybe it has some connection with Oak Ridge, because in 1950 they had a lot of sightings at Oak Ridge.
Yeah.
A lot of sightings at Oak Ridge in 1950. And I wonder how, if these guys are somehow connected with something official, or was it just an unofficial little discussion group, or what?
Official or unofficial? That's something we need to. Well, now it's a part of our today's show, so maybe people after us will take hold of it. And Oak Ridger was formed in 1949, January 20th, 1949, by Darrell Richardson. Now, that's according to people, Oak Ridger newspaper. Is that where you found it, in American Daily Newspaper?
Right.
That was Oak Ridge, Tennessee. It's owned by Gannett now, Gannett. But Gannett, Gannett, if you want to write that down. But that's who owns it now. Now, that was a publisher, Darrell Richardson, and the newspaper of record for Anderson County, Tennessee, and the city of Oak Ridge. Now again,
just a little after this, in 1950, a story came out that the Atomic Energy Commission had a questionnaire that if things were seen around nuclear sites, that they wanted people to fill out these questionnaires. Now, I've seen some reports that went into the AEC. So the Air Force is investigating, and the Atomic Energy Commission is investigating, both at the same time.
Yeah. Now, see, I was taught, but I don't know how, that the Men in Black got started in the intelligence community through the nuclear, or this Oak Ridge Atomic Energy Commission, but it had to do with secret bases and secrets, of course. So I don't know. I'm up for investigating, but nuclear cities, Men in Black something official or unofficial about nuclear cities or any? I see Oak Ridge, the Atomic Energy Commission in Los Alamos. Now, we have our own classification, right, for people working in nuclear, always did. So it may have something to do with keeping classified material classified.
It's a Q clearance, a Q clearance.
Los Alamos and Oak Ridge Q clearance.
Yeah, but it was atomic energy clearance. It's called Q clearance. You used to have it in the military till 1954, and then it was real hard to get. And there's a lot of people in the military that needed access to nuclear information. So in 1954, they said, "Well, everybody that handles nukes doesn't have to have a Q clearance," because they had so much trouble getting. People in Air Force intelligence didn't all have a Q clearance. Not very many of them did. In fact, I think General Cabell said he went to a atomic test, and most of the people in Air Force intelligence couldn't go there because they didn't have a Q clearance. So about 1954, they did away with that requirement for the military. Now, if you're handling nuclear weapons, you need to have a special. You need to have a special clearance. One of them is called Personal Reliability Program. I was in that in the military, but in the early days, I don't think it was called that. But and they have two levels. The people that actually work with it with their hands, in other words, assembling the nuclear weapons, and then the people that code them or give orders about nuclear weapons, they have a different classification. So it's their classification isn't different, but their position is different. So some people they just work with it. Other people can relay nuclear orders and are involved with codes and locking nuclear weapons and things like that. That's a higher level position. And the people that just assemble them or shoot them have another position.
Well, this group is so complicated now. One of the guys just called me from Hawaii that wanted to come on the last few minutes, but I don't see his number here yet. But how we can move forward with this, Jan. And like I said, Janet thinks you're more nuts and bolts, but you're more historical than nuts and bolts, meaning
yeah, I am more historical. Like I said, the only thing I'm really the thing I'm most interested, let's put it that way, in UFOs is effects on the environment or people or animals. I'm interested in that because it's hard to study, somebody's memory of what happened after something went away. But if it affected the environment somehow, then it's possible to take samples, or if it happens to people, if they're affected by the UFO, like all the way back to World War II. This British bomber went into Germany and they encountered a UFO, and everybody got headaches. And this was like, what do you call it? When the people have the real bad headaches.
Migraines? Migraines.
They said it was worse than any migraine they'd ever had. and they all got migraine, and they all had to be hospitalized because it was so bad.
Well, we may all have
and all of them got
Iranian stuff coming up.
and all of them got over it on the same day. And
wow.
So Dr. McDonald was able to talk to them, and he was interested in following up in the medical reports. But I mean, this was in the '60s and World War II. That was a way away. So that's one thing that never happened. But,
well, let me let Tommy. I'm going to have somebody that's been with me and us to do an event together, and we never pulled it off with Janet Carroll Lesson, which it's been on a couple of these shows with you, Jan. But this is Tommy's first time. Tommy, we've got 15 minutes left, but I'd like you to add something of credibility to our show for Folk Life with Jan, because Jan has been doing this for over 50 years as a historian with the government in ufology, and he's very well known, very worldwide thought of in ufology, very in depth. And but at the same time, I've got you down coming on, Tommy, for hallucinations and prevalent UFO sightings and mass psychology, because you worked with the Bob Mack, or well, that we did mention that. But Jan, this is Thomas Anthony Sinisi. His also goes by Tommy Hawksblood. He was a fire dancer in Indian culture. He's a historian, but he's known in ufology and had talked to Jan Harzan once about MUFON in Hawaii. But Tommy, I don't know how to get you involved with Jan, because y'all both do different work, but we're all in the ACE Folklife or the UFO Association work. So Tommy, can you, Jan, I don't know how to do this, because these are different facets.
Well, let me just say this. Tommy Hawksblood, I'm calling from the Big Island of Hawaii. I've been involved with UFOs since I was 6 years old. Now, there's two things that I'd like to mention to you. One is around 2001, a ship crashed into the ocean off of Long Island. I was staying in a millionaire. He's a real he designed all the houses on Long Island. He was the top whatever they design houses and everything. Well, he was with his girlfriend in his house. His house was right on the ocean. As the ship crashed into the ocean, he said he saw this big light come, and when they were, I say this, they were making love in front of the window. They were both burnt, and they turned dark red, both of them. And they didn't know what to do. They called the hospital up, and here's the real funny part about the whole thing. They said, take 3 aspirins and go to bed. Not come into the hospital, not what's going on, just take 3 aspirin and go to bed, which they did. The next morning when they woke up, they were fine. I mean, he showed me the paper clippings and everything of the ship that all these people saw. But how did the hospital know to tell them to take 3 aspirins and stay in bed? If you go to the hospital and say,
I got no idea, but that's one of the things I'm interested in is this. Some of these people, like Stokes in 1957, he had a sunburn, and when he went in to talk, he was at White Sands and close encounter, and when he went to talk to people, some of them noticed that he did have a sunburn. And it slowly went away, like things like that do. And he claimed it was from the UFO.
Well, Travis Walton said the same thing, no, didn't he? When he came up back from it.
Yeah,
White Sands.
So
they had to treat me for a sunburn and like burns on my legs like impetigo. I was taken over from Los Alamos with that little incident over to an Indian reservation to treat my burns, and like I had sunburn, but my feet had impetigo on them, and they don't know what caused it. But it was after I went up White Sands and supposedly had a visitation. So I wonder if you think those may have something to do with, or is it
what I'm saying is this short-term sunburn thing. is known in ufology, and some things are if you look at the 1967 Mechalek case. That's much more serious than sunburn. And Mechalek was hospitalized, and we do have his medical records. And he was, he was really seriously in bad trouble. And his relatives said we would go into the room with him, and he just smelled awful. He was this terrible smell was coming out of him, and his treatment is, I mean, it's well documented. This is where we have in ufology we're not, many things are not well documented, and they're just on not much better than hearsay. But this was actual medical examinations of this guy. He had burns on his chest. He had supposedly got close to it, and he burned his glove. And of course, everybody says he's a hoaxer. But he was treated for at least 2 weeks in the hospital, and he probably died earlier than he should have because of this case. And my friend's doing one in New Mexico right now where this kid got burned, and of course it got in the newspapers. This is back in 57. Got burned. He was sitting on he was a little kid, and so people talk to his parents and everything. Of course, he's not a little kid anymore. He's a grown man. So my friend went and said, I'm going to see if I can find this guy. He's easy to find. He still lives in the same area. And he talked to him, and he asked him, is this just a joke or a game, or were your parents trying to pull a fast one on somebody? And he says, no. He says it was a horrible experience, and I got burned so bad I had to go to the hospital. So this is, this.
Well, here's a question.
This is where you can get at some core information when you can do this.
All right, now I have a question. Think about it. Now, out of the people that are actually abducted, I'm not going to say who is and who isn't, but out of the people that are actually abducted, only certain people get burnt. Now,
well,
the other thing on that.
Yeah, I am not a real abduction. Let's put it this way.
All right, but here's the other thing. I do a show with a woman that's been being abducted half of her life. All right. We were supposed to do it today. She's definitely sick right now. She's been sick since the last show we did. Now, when I first met her, I told her to get checked for radiation. And she says she had a dog checked, and the dog was radioactive. So she's getting actually treated for multiple things right now, but all symptoms for radiation poisoning. She's losing her hair. She's losing her teeth. She lost 4 teeth in 2 months. She's losing her fingernails. And she feels deathly sick as well. Now, 2 years ago, she had this giant mass cut out of her stomach, which they wouldn't tell her what it was. All right, she went to the court. She went to Grand Court. They said we can't release that information. And they filmed it. In England, they film every operation. And she can't even get a copy of the operation. But in the interim as well, she said she's going to get checked for radiation on the 27th. And I told her that she was exposed to it. And I said, anybody that gets on a UFO is exposed to radiation. It depends what level of the immune system that they have in their body at the time when they get taken on a ship. Now, I was next to a ship. I didn't get burnt. So when I think about, now, like I said, this couple of this family, this millionaire that I was in his house and everything, I was living there for a month. He went to Europe or somewhere, but when he came back, he told me the whole story and he showed me all the pictures. But he was inside a glass window, in back of a glass window. The ship was maybe half a mile out into the ocean, and he got burnt. So it's just like, I'm just trying to figure it out for myself, because I believe totally if you get truly abducted, you're exposed to radiation. Unless they put you in a space suit and bring you on a ship, you're going to be exposed. And they don't care. And a lot of these people that say they're abducted, I would disagree. And I said, well, you have no proof, and then you don't even have any kind of evidence to your body that you were taken on a ship. I mean, now these people that are getting implants, that's something totally different. But getting back to the question is, like, it's kind of weird how certain people get certain effects and other people get certain effects. I mean, it's the same. They get different stories as well.
Well,
but for me...
Yeah, just UFO sightings themselves.
Right.
Not everybody that's close to a UFO ever demonstrates any medical effects or physiological effects. So how do you explain that? Well, I have no explanation other than maybe something's going on at the time. Let's put it that way. If it comes from an intelligent-directed source, when they take off or something, or when they're just whatever they're doing, there may have some effect on people.
Well, you think
if you notice, when people try to approach a UFO, a lot of times they take off. Maybe that's so they won't get hurt.
Yeah.
But that's all beer talk. We don't know.
Do you know much about the story of Left at Eastgate, Larry Warren?
Yeah, but Larry Warren is not a reliable person.
Well, wait. See, here's the thing. I knew him. I was with him before he even released the book. It took him 10 years to get his Social Security number out to prove who he was. After they released him, I mean, he did 2 TV shows. All those people involved with that case came out, including the general, said he went over to the ship and touched it. I mean, that whole thing is being blown open. Linda Moulton Howe has no clue what's going on. She asked all the wrong people. There's 3 people involved that were there, including Larry Warren. He taped it. He actually taped when he was talking to the ship when it was on the ground. They played that tape on TV as well. I think he has more proof than anybody. I mean, he went into town to call his family up.
I thought Larry Warren was,
happened.
when Rudolph happened, he wasn't even there.
No.
Are you talking about Enelston?
No, I'm talking about Larry Warren. I was with him personally. He wrote the book, Left at Eastgate.
Yeah, I know. My friend knows him real well, too. But
well, the other guy is claiming that it's a lie.
He has a lot of problems. How about that picture with the UFO and the fighter plane?
I don't know about that picture, but all I know,
it's a fake. He sent Greenwood a picture of UFO with a fighter plane for some reason, and then all of a sudden, I can't remember what it was, but Greenwood had just happened to have the picture, and then he's flogging this picture on a TV program showing a UFO being chased by the same fighter plane. It's the same picture. They just transposed the UFO on it. So, I mean, this guy's got problems. This guy's got a problem. Talking about what really happened, that's the problem with human testimony.
Even Travis Walton, he's trying to do that movie over because there's so many lies in it. After all this time, he still doesn't know what really happened on that plane. He came out with this magic giant hand, and he says it's a healing hand. Anybody that's abducted changes, usually for the worst. Because in my program, in the normal reality.
Like I said, I've seen these things that are so big, these abduction, where they interview people and put them under in hypnotism, and these things are as big as the old Chicago phone book. And when you get through reading them, you don't know anything more than when you started. That's pretty much why
Well, there's
if
a new
somebody
show
comes
on
up to me and says they've been abducted, I pass them on to somebody else that can deal with
Okay.
it. I can't deal with it.
There's a new show on TV. There's a new show called Scared Famous. It's all famous people, really big name people coming out with their experiences with ghosts and aliens. It's really good. I mean, they go through the whole story. They explain what happened. These people sold their houses. I mean, but it's now, are they just doing it to do another show on TV? Or are they
I don't
really
know.
telling
I can't see.
First
of all, I don't know anything about it, so I can't speculate on why people do things.
We're at the end of the show too.
Yeah, I'm.
Oh.
I had one guy that I was talking to, and he's Puerto Rican. He didn't speak English very well, and he had an education that was. You could just tell by talking to him. He wasn't well educated. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's just the way life is, But he was saying that he was abducted, and they were the abductors were showing him how to do stuff, and he didn't really want to talk about it, but he would give me little tidbits. So he's showing me on paper what they're doing. They have circles and dividing things up on the circle and taking little slices of the pie out and using it. And I said, they're trying to teach this guy higher mathematics. That's what it looks like to me. If I believe that he's not that well educated, what they're trying to do to him is teach him higher mathematics. Now but it's not proof of anything. Maybe he could be a professor of mathematics at some university. I didn't know that, but to me he seemed very sincere. So that was the one that really got me. That was but like I said, he didn't really want to talk about it, and I tried to get him to talk to Dick Hall as somebody more sympathetic than I am, and he didn't want to do it. He didn't really, he was very, very standoffish. He was very, felt like, he wanted to be reticent. He didn't really want to talk about what happened. To me, it was just an interesting encounter with this guy.
Well, I know at times,
like I said, I think they were. If there's anything to it, that's what I would say. It's somebody trying to teach somebody higher mathematics.
Well, look, I know, TJ, our time's up, right?
Right. Yeah, we're out of time. So, Tommy, maybe you can come back sometime. I know Tuesday we usually do with Tina Bird and Tommy on a live video, but Jan and I just do radio audio. But we're starting to mix audio and video together. So, Jan, I guess we'll meet back next Tuesday. And Tommy, maybe you can come in sometimes the last 30 minutes or so like you did with questions on UFO Association. But I just want to make sure this is for recording purposes, Tommy, for historical purposes, right? And it's not about anything else other than archiving, or we're not debating here or anything. So people, we'll be back next Tuesday, Jan, I guess with the Lord willing and the creek don't rise, as we say in Kentucky. But I'm now in Gulf Breeze, Florida. Jan, tell them where you're located. Tommy's in Hawaii. But where
I'm in Connecticut. So we had one program where we did about half the program on indigenous people here in America. So maybe we could talk about that sometime.
You want
we
to
were
talk
talking about Geronimo and some of the people that were at Fort Sill. Of course, was one of the.
I want to plan that for next week. Then, Tommy can come back Tuesday. If you want to do an Indian and I did like that Geronimo story because I'm here in Pensacola, and you heard airplanes going over jets. I'm down here like the Blue Angels and all that, folks. All right, Jan, that's a good idea. And Tommy can pull together. You think the history with the Kachina dolls would be interesting, and the Sky People, any of that indigenous over there? Is there something like that, Jan, or no?
Yeah, maybe something like. I mean, there's a lot of different creation myths too, which are very interesting.
You want to give so many stories.
Yeah. Well, we're documenting here, but this is about archiving, and I do want to get them under separate. I'm fixing to have to pay some money to build a separate archiving, but even though I've got live radio shows here, Tommy knows he started with me in the beginning. He was on my first show, Jan, here, the very first show with Janet, Carol Lesson, and Dr. Lesson, and Lynn Caston, a writer for Bear and Company, or one of those esoteric authors, and then a guy with the name of A something out of Phoenix. I forget his name. But anyway, we can come back next week, and we'll just keep doing this, and hopefully someday we may get it written down, but we can put them up on YouTube and get the archives. I hope to make books out of this, but right now it's just oral reports, folks, and we'll do the best we can. Jan, you got some good ideas, and I guess we'll take up various stories next Tuesday then, okay?
Okay, see you then.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tommy. Everybody can call me when you can catch me. Love and light. All right. ACO UFO out. ACO UFO Association.